What's going on, everyone? DSP here, and welcome to another edition of the Hateful Truth video game review series, where I give you maximum truth and minimum bullshit regarding the newest releases. Forgive me, because this is actually the first time I'm trying to use a new tripod, and it is much higher now, I'm realizing. My other tripod's usually about this height, and I'm looking up this high, and I'm wondering how this is going to look different. This will be an experiment for me, but if it looks weird, please let me know. Also, what I'm going to do, because I learned from my mistakes when I made a channel update the other day, I have a new ceiling fan here, and I left it on like high, and all you could hear in the video was it sounded like you were in like a wind tunnel because of the fan. So I'm actually turning the fan off right now, and hopefully that will alleviate any audio problems that we have. Alright, so anyway, today's Hateful Truth is going to be extremely unique, okay? And the reason is because, number one, we're going to deal with a handheld game, which every once in a while I do get a chance to review handheld games, and I think people enjoy it because, unfortunately, right now there is no way to do video game playthroughs on YouTube of handheld games. There's no, like, video out for the Nintendo 3DS or for the PS Vita. And so, therefore, really people depend on reviews to know if these games are good or not, okay? And not only is this game unique because it's a handheld game, but because it's kind of like, was almost pitched as a system seller earlier this year, to the point where people were saying this would be as good as a full console release, and that honestly could have been a full console release. I have some things to say about that, some really great things, and a couple detriments, but we'll get into that. Today we're going to be talking about a game that I've been playing for quite some time, but really just didn't have a lot of time to dedicate to playing to until recently, and that is Resident Evil Revelations, okay? Now, I'm fully aware that this game came out much earlier this year. I apologize that it took me so long to play through it. Really what ended up happening was I didn't travel that much during the course of the year, and let's face it, when do you really play handheld games? It's when you're traveling, when you're on a plane, when you're in a car. And I didn't have this when MagFest had come out because it hadn't been released yet. And then when we went to the Too Many Games gaming convention, I did play this a few hours while we were on the road. And then it kind of fell by the wayside. I didn't have time again to play it until just recently this week. I said, you know what, I want to play this. I liked it when I was playing it. This will be a good lead-in for Resident Evil 6 coming up in about a month. So let me get through it. And I sat here every night, after actually gaming during the day, I sat here on my couch and started playing it at night to get in some good gaming time for it. And I finally beat it as of yesterday, and I want to give everyone my honest opinions on the game, okay? So let's talk a little bit about it and what exactly it is. Resident Evil Revelations is a spin-off title from the main Resident Evil series. It is meant to be canon in the story of Resident Evil. It actually takes place between Resident Evil 4 and 5, okay? It actually takes place just before the DLC for Resident Evil 5 called Lost in Nightmares, where Jill and Chris storm the mansion that's like the replica of the original Umbrella Mansion from Resident Evil 1, and at the end of that, that's when Wesker actually fights them and ends up kidnapping Jill. Well, it happens just before that. We join Jill and Chris as they're working for the BSAA. This is after they had joined that organization, and they're investigating this this mysterious ship that has appeared. That apparently it's just like it's out in the ocean and there's a distress call, but it's a trap. Okay, they go out there just to find out that it's a decoy. Chris really wasn't kidnapped. Jill went out to save Chris, and come to find out, Chris was never kidnapped. It was all a decoy, and it follows this interesting parallel plotline with the Umbrella plotline. It really doesn't have anything to do with Umbrella, but it is canon with the whole Resident Evil series, where apparently in 2004 there was this utopia. And it was like a town that ran completely on solar power and all this kind of stuff. And then this terrorist organization named Ventrilo took it over and actually put biological weapons, including hunters from the Resident Evil series, on the island to like destroy the experiment. Subsequently, a governing body called, I believe it's the FSA, I want to say the FBC, the Federal Bioterror Commission. The head of this organization made the decision that he was going to use this global satellite, it's called like the Hand of God or something like that, to completely decimate this city because it had been completely overrun with biological monsters. They didn't want it to be an outbreak similar to the Umbrella Crisis. So they used this satellite to have a laser come down and destroy the entire city. Fast forward to several years later, where supposedly Chris gets kidnapped. Jill goes to this boat to save him. Come to find out, supposedly it's Ventrilo. Ventrilo had set up Jill, and it's a big setup. The ship is infested with biological monsters. There's flash of flashbacks, twists and turns. There's a handful of new characters that joined for the first time. Do I really need to explain to you that there's twists and turns in the plot of a Resident Evil game? Probably not, okay? What ends up happening is you're going to have Chris involved, you're going to have other characters involved, so they're going to be, oh, they're double agents, oh, they're working for this guy, they're working for that guy. Is Ventrilo really involved? Who's behind it? Is it Umbrella? Is it somebody else? And, of course, by the end of the game, you're completely mind-fucked. But one thing I do have to say, this is one of the few Resident Evil games that when I finally did beat it, the first time through, I understood. Like, I'll be honest, Resident Evil 5, you beat it, and you kind of get really confused halfway through about what's really happening and everything. This game, I completely understood the plot by the end. And the way that it ends is good because it actually leads straight into that Lost in Nightmares DLC from Resident Evil 5. It shows how it could be mainstream and canon. But one complaint that I do have, it really doesn't have any bearing on the Resident Evil series story-wise. Meaning, this game could have never happened, and it's not going to affect Resident Evil 6, and it's not going to affect anything that's happened up to now. It wasn't like there were references in this game to direct things that happened in other games or anything like that. It really is a standalone game. And I think they did that on purpose, because they knew a lot of people weren't going to play the one on 3DS, who were major fans of Resident Evil, and so they said, let's make a game so it's not like they're completely missing out on something critical to the series, okay? So, the game is unique in a lot of ways. In some ways, it's the first game, like I said, it really does attempt to be as meaty as a regular console game on a handheld. This game has 12 chapters, each of which are anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes long. And by the time I beat the game, it was over 10 hours of total gameplay. Now you're saying over 10 hours for a campaign of a handheld game, and you know, it's a campaign, it's not like Super Mario Brothers, where there's a lot of repetition, it's you playing through the unique stages of the game. That's a lot to be said. There's a lot of content in this game. It does actually have two-player co-op over the internet, so if you have a friend and you want to go through the game co-op, the game is fully co-op. You're never by yourself. And a lot of people may complain about that and say, well, I didn't like that about Resident Evil 5 because it wasn't really scary because you were always with someone else. That is present in Resident Evil Revelations, just to let everyone know. They're going along with the same vein as Resident Evil 5. And speaking of that, it is very similar in many ways to Resident Evil 5. Well, most of your weapons, if all, are going to have a laser sight, so all you do is you aim down the barrel of the laser sight to shoot your enemies, and whether you shoot them in the head or different body parts will determine whether or not it does more damage. Especially later on in the game, there are enemies that actually have weak points in the legs and such that you need to be shooting. You're going to have a melee weapon, so yeah, some enemies you can hit them a couple times and run up and melee them, and they'll die quicker than if you were just shooting them. You're going to be picking up green herbs during the game. In that regard, the game is super simplified. There's no combining of herbs. There's no red herb, blue herb. It's just a green herb. You just use it to heal yourself on the fly. Very simple. You will be finding many different weapons through the course of the game, okay? Handguns, more powerful handguns such as the Magnum, assault rifles, machine guns, light machine guns, and heavy machine guns. There's actually two different kinds in the game. Shotguns. Later on, you'll find the RPG. So there is a wide variety of weapons, and through the course of the game, there's some unique things that actually allow for customization of the weapons that really adds a little bit to the exploration aspect of the game. So what they give you is a scanner, okay? This is unique. You haven't really used anything like this in a Resident Evil game before. And what you do is, during the course of the game, you pull out the scanner and you scan a room that you're in, okay? And there might be a blip. If there's a blip, you continue scanning, and all of a sudden, an item will actually appear in the room. So it's very useful to be sure that you're always up on ammo and such. Don't just rely on the things that you can see. You have to constantly be pulling out the scanner and searching around the rooms, okay? Also, when you're fighting an enemy, you can pull out the scanner and you scan them, and it'll give you a percentage out of 100%. Now, if you're fighting a live enemy, it'll give you a larger percentage than if you kill the enemy and you scan his dead body on the ground. Once you accumulate 100%, you actually get a green herb in your inventory automatically. So again, similar to how you could get ammo by scanning all over the place, you can also accumulate extra green herbs and healing items by scanning enemies during the course of the game. So really, it does add a little bit of a different twist of an element that hasn't been in a Resident Evil game up to this point. And I like how they did it. I think if it was just cut and paste combat without having to do a little bit of searching and scanning, it may have been a little bit more of a boring game, but I did like this aspect of the game, okay? Okay, so, that being said, what will you be doing in Resident Evil Revelations? You'll be going through dark corridors, enemies will be doing jump scares, you'll be up against hordes of enemies that are seemingly never stop, but then you find out that you can actually survive. You'll be exploring 2 different ships. You'll be going to flashbacks to Terra Grigia, which is that utopian-like city that I told you about before it was destroyed. You'll be doing flashbacks to things before the story ever happened. It's pretty crazy the way that they jump back and forth. There's actually things, I think, up in like Antarctica, or not Antarctica, like the North Pole, there's some stages too. So it is interesting that, you know, you do get a variety of gameplay, even though the majority of the gameplay does happen in the same location, these 2 ships on the ocean. It's still kind of fun because you do feel like there's variety in the gameplay. They actually do throw in some rail shooting stages as well. There's about 2 of those, as well as a couple of pretty epic boss battles where you really have to figure out what you have to do in order to kill these bosses. Similar to other Resident Evil games, it's not always straightforward where you just shoot the fuck out of the guy. You may have to figure out a pattern or a certain way in order to survive the certain boss fights that you'll come up against. But that being said, you're going to have typical Resident Evil gameplay. You'll go from point A to point B fighting monsters. Oh, this door's locked. You have to find a certain key to get in. So you're going to backtrack. Oh, there's a new area. You go to the new area. Oh, you found the key. So now you backtrack back through that whole area again. You're finally able to open that door, go through that door. Oh, you found a weapon. The weapon allows you to go fight an enemy. Yada, yada, yada. It's very similar to the gameplay of other Resident Evil games, okay? It is a little bit more confined, meaning because it is a portable game, they knew they weren't going to be able to have an insanely large amount of locales to go to. So the majority of the gameplay does take place on these 2 specific ships in the ocean. And there is going to be, just to warn everyone, I know a lot of people don't like this, but there will be a lot of backtracking. There will be certain rooms and things where you go through 3 or 4 times. Sometimes there's a cool element where maybe it gets flooded because the ship's going down, and so now you have to swim through the areas you've been through 2 or 3 times, but now they're underwater, and there's swimming mechanics and things like that in the game as well. There are puzzle-solving mechanics where there's maybe invisible lasers, and you have to use the scanner to figure out how to get through the lasers, push a button, it moves the lasers, now you need to use the scanner again to see where the lasers have moved, and you have to walk through them, okay? So the gameplay of the game is pretty good. I do have to say it is hampered a little bit by the Nintendo 3DS, and let me explain. Obviously, when you look at it, well, the 3DS only has 1 thumbstick, and that being said, the thumbstick isn't even that very good. It's a thumb pad, and I really feel that they should have went with a stick instead of a pad. The pad never feels extra responsive, you know what I mean? Especially for a game like this where you need to maybe make critical turns or quick movements. The thumb pad can be a little bit delayed or not as accurate as a thumbstick. I've been saying this since day one. I wish they went with a thumbstick with the Nintendo 3DS instead of a pad. But that being said, for what you have here for a control setup, I think Capcom did a really good job, okay? So what you're going to do, obviously you turn and you walk forward and backward with the thumb pad. By holding a shoulder button, you can actually strafe. So there is strafing available in the game, okay? You've got your quick turn and all that stuff from the previous Resident Evil 4 and 5. It's still in the game. Now, how do you shoot? Okay? Well, you do have 2 triggers, but really what they do here to shoot properly, you actually hold the right trigger to look down the barrel, which I know for a lot of people that's different, okay? But you hold the right trigger to look down the barrel, so now you have your laser sight, and use the Y button to fire. X is going to be your reload, okay? And, I'm sorry, not X, I believe it was B or A is your reload, and X is your melee attack. You can actually go between different things, such as the melee knife, or throwing grenades that you find throughout the course of the game by going left on the D-pad. If you go up on the D-pad, you switch between your main weapon and your scanner, okay? If you hit right on the D-pad, you scroll through all of your available weapons in your inventory. Now, where it does go a little bit awry is because everything's done with the D-pad. Just listen to what I said. Left changes your melee weapon, right changes your regular weapon in your hand. So, let's say for example, you have 3 weapons, because that's the most you can hold at a time. So I have the shotgun, and I need to get to the machine gun. Well, the machine gun is 2 weapons over in my inventory. There's no way to just click left and go backwards in your inventory and grab the machine gun. No, you have to press right twice, because you can only change your primary weapons by pressing right. You can't go right to go to this one and left to go to this one. You have to keep pressing right to get to the correct weapon. Same thing with the melee weapons. To get from the knife through the different grenades, you have to keep pressing left, which could be a little bit of a hassle, especially if you're in tight quarters, if you're in a tough fight and you need to switch quickly. It could be hard to switch weapons, switch between weapons quickly. That is one definite detriment to the game. Now, one thing is, they did make this game compatible with the dual thumbstick configuration. If you remember, for 20 bucks you can go buy this second thumbstick that comes out here, because I guess for some games like this one in particular, they knew that the game would be easier to control with a second thumb pad. Well, as you can see, I never got it, and the reason I never got it was 2 reasons. Number one, I wanted to experience the game in the native control scheme. I'm sorry, but adding accessories is not a game's native control scheme. Everyone bought the 3DS, the game should be playable on the 3DS. It is, but it is a little bit more difficult. Probably if I had 2 thumbsticks it would have been easier. But this leads me to point number 2. No retail store in my area has ever had the thumbstick accessory. Whenever they get it, it sells out immediately because people want 2 thumbsticks on their handheld system. So it's a little frustrating that I could never even get it. I could have like back ordered it online and eventually got it, but I wasn't going to go through all that trouble. Every time I went to the store, I said, do you have it? And they never have it. So I never got it, and I said, screw it. I'm just going to play the game with the native control scheme. Okay? So, one thing that I definitely want to talk a little bit about, and it's both a plus and it's a pain in the ass for this game. The graphics and the sound are outstanding, okay? When I was playing this game, a lot of the times I was, the gameplay comes on the top screen, and I'm watching it, and I'm like, I swear to God, this could be on, like, the Xbox 360. Now, keep in mind, yeah, okay, there's a couple things. It's not as good as the Xbox 360. A couple characters a little bit blocky. But the textures and the resolution of the visuals on the 3DS are excellent. The game looked really good. And, looking at the back of the box, you might say, oh, that's just that's just concept art. Well, yeah, of course it is. But the truth of the matter is the game kind of does look like the back of the box. So I have to say the graphics were outstanding. The sound as well. If you're using headphones and good headphones with this, the voice acting is great, the music is really good, the sound effects, you can hear the environmental sound effects of the monsters sneaking up around you. It's really, really neat. And I think they did a really great job with the graphics and the sound. But I don't think that the average person will be able to experience the graphics and the sound properly on the 3DS, and let me explain what I mean. Like I said, I started playing Resident Evil Revelations when I was on the way to a gaming convention, too many games, in a car. So I was in a car with headphones on, and the car was moving and it was jolting around a little bit, and I was like, wow, these graphics are good, but I can't really enjoy them because this isn't, like an isolated environment where I could just be steady like this and hearing everything that was going on, okay? I thought it was good, but I wasn't really getting the full experience. This week, when I decided to pick up the game and play it again, I played it in my condo, right here on the couch, all the lights off, with headphones, really high quality headphones. I actually have some of the better Beats by Dr. Dre headphones that I was using with these, okay? And it sounded outstanding. I mean, the fucking sound quality was top notch. So the graphics looked great and the sound was top notch when I was sitting on my couch playing it by myself in an isolated environment. To which I have to say this. When does the average person ever play a handheld system in an isolated environment like that? And the answer is rarely. The whole idea of a handheld system is that you play it when you're doing other things. That's why you need it to be handheld. If I wanted to play a game on my couch, I'd play it on one of my major consoles. I wouldn't be sitting here playing a handheld game. And I made this point both with the 3DS and the PS Vita when they were being released. I said, this is great, they're upping the resolution of the screens, the sound they claim is going to be great, but why do I want to play it on a little rinky-dink system? I want to play it on my TV if it really has that capability. And I really felt frustrated playing Resident Evil Revelations. I was dying. This game screams for the 3DS to have some audio-visual cable to hook up to your home theater system so you can experience it in full quality, blown up graphics, and experience the sound. I really think the game suffers. A lot of people will not experience the full extent of the game because most people don't just sit here on the couch by themselves in the dark with great headphones on to play these handheld games. So I don't understand what this whole mentality of both Nintendo and Sony is, that we're going to really increase the quality of our handheld systems and we're going to have AAA titles that could be console games on here. Why don't you just make them console games? People would fucking buy them and play them, you know what I mean? So I'm really just blown away by that. I mean, one thing that really came through was the 3D aspect. I have to say, out of all the games so far that I've played on the 3DS, I think I enjoyed the 3D aspect of Resident Evil almost the best. I have to say that Super Mario 3D Land did a little bit better because of some of the perspectives and things that they did, but this game did pretty good. Like, the depth because it is a third-person shooter, the depth of seeing the enemy further away, and you can try to judge which one's further and coming closer, and you could shoot and aim for the one that's closer to you because you've got that depth perception. It actually came in pretty handy, and some of the big boss fights, like giant bosses and tentacles and shit are flying at you in 3D, was really neat, and I really enjoyed that. So I think this is one of the games that does shine because of the 3D aspect of the 3DS. But again, I really feel that the average person will not get the full experience out of this game because no one's sitting here in an isolated environment to play it like I was to finally beat it, and most people don't have that option. If they're going to play a handheld game, it's because they took it with them on a car ride, or on their commute, their daily commute, or on a plane, or whatever. If I would hate to play this game on a plane, because I probably wouldn't be able to hear jack shit. You know what I mean? So, all these things being said, okay? The fact that it has great graphics, great sound, but you can't really take full advantage of it, but it does utilize the 3D to a very good way. Interesting story, but it's kind of a throwaway story that really doesn't factor into the overall story of the Resident Evil, which is a little bit of a bummer. The fact that there's 12 chapters that are pretty long, a half an hour to 45 minutes, and the game can run anywhere from 10 to 12 hours long through your first playthrough. There's one other thing I forgot to mention that I do want to mention. There are hidden items in the game called upgrade parts, and you'll find them in different places. Maybe you'll find them in a locker. Maybe you'll find them in a hidden room. Maybe you'll be scanning and you'll find one, okay? Or maybe there's a difficult puzzle and you backtrack at one point when you have a key from much later in the game to an earlier portion of the game, and there's actually a hidden item in there, and it's a customizable part for your weapons. There are actually weapons lockers in the game where you can equip these customizable parts to your weapons and make them significantly better. Whether it's increased ammo capacity, increased damage, maybe increased stun, increased reload speed, anything you can think of, okay? And you can load 3 to 4 of these upgrades on each weapon to the point where at the end of the game, I had a Magnum that could kill almost everything with one hit, including the final boss, okay? So, if you really are diligent, you can find these upgrade things. It makes the game significantly easier when you have the powered up weapon. So I just wanted to mention that before I finished, but the fact that it does have that, plus it has the ability to search with the scanner for more ammo, to scan the enemies with the scanner to get more green herbs. A simplified control scheme, but was probably needed because it was on a handheld, but it is still a little bit difficult to control overall. Great voice acting. I really feel that this game could be remade in HD as a console release. I think that if there's enough meat there, now it's not as long as a typical Resident Evil game. Maybe it would be good as like a $30 DLC, you know, something on PSN or, you know, Xbox Live, something like that. I could definitely see it being as a console release. But it is a really good game. And if you're looking for something different on your handheld besides, another platformer, a generic race game, this is probably a system seller for the Nintendo 3DS, being completely honest. Even with all its flaws and the fact that it can't really be experienced to the fullest because it is on a handheld, I still think it was really good, and I really enjoyed the experience, and I think Capcom actually did a really good job on this game, and that they were actually held back because they had to develop it for the 3DS, okay? So overall, in the overall scheme of things, I'm going to give Resident Evil Revelations a 7.75. Really good. It doesn't reach like amazing greatness. I really feel that if this had a story that maybe mattered a little bit more, you know what I mean? If it actually factored into the canon mainstream story of Resident Evil, maybe I'd have a little bit of a better experience. Maybe if the controls were slightly better. I did say a little bit, they were a little bit wonky with the selection of weapons with the D-pad and such. That was a little bit frustrating. You know, I don't know, it felt like a great game, but it didn't feel like, oh, this is an amazing AAA Resident Evil title. It did feel a little bit watered down, probably, again, because they were limited with what they were putting it for. So I think they did the best at what they could do, but I have to compare it with other games, and I do think that a game like Super Mario 3D Land does have more value and is a more entertaining game than this one, even though this one is obviously a completely different style of game. It's still really good. If you love Resident Evil, this is a must-buy if you have a 3DS, let's put it that way. Is it a game that if you love Resident Evil and you don't own a 3DS, you should buy? Now that's a question that I have to say I'm not so sure. It's not, for me it's not, oh, I have to buy the 3DS immediately. It's like, okay, if I'm going to get the 3DS because I like this game, and this game, this will be one of those 3 games that I mentioned, okay? So it's pretty good, pretty fun, interesting, good story, like I said, great graphics, great music, but it does have a couple, you know, faux pas along the way because it is what it is, and I enjoyed it, but it's just, it's great, it's good, but it's not amazingly great, so I give it a 7.75 out of 10, okay? So that's it for this episode of the Hateful Truth video game review series. I hope you found it informative. You now know whether for yourself you're interested in a game like Resident Evil Revelations or not. And again, I try to give you maximum truth, minimum bullshit. I could have kissed the game's ass and said, oh, it's a great game, or I could have just hated on the 3DS the whole time. But I'm trying to give you a fair and balanced idea here of really what the quality of the game is, and I hope that I accomplished that with this review. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and I will see you next time on the Hateful Truth. Peace.